When you stop following the old pattern, you start to get a bunch of those pesky feelings, the things you've been trying to avoid your entire adult life. Maybe you feel anxious. You might feel selfish or ashamed. And those feelings can be very convincing. And this is where another internal boundary comes in. You remind yourself this guilt, it's a feeling, not an instruction. Feelings are information. They're not commands or dictates that you have to follow. Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. If you're tired of feeling fragmented and overwhelmed, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of wholeness, authenticity, and healthy boundaries. I'm a woman in recovery who is also a boundaries coach and speaker. I share raw and honest insights from my own journey and the principles of 12-step recovery. Discover how to set boundaries without guilt or shame, overcome people-pleasing tendencies, manage your emotions effectively, cultivate a stronger sense of self, and build healthier relationships. My approach is raw, honest, and sometimes a little bit, a lot sweary. I'm an avid beachcomber and a formerly closeted fan of the Hallmark Channel, especially Christmas movies. I wear fingerless gloves almost all year round because my hands are always cold. And I love taking pictures of license plates with my initials BN on them. I don't speak for or endorse any particular 12-step program of recovery. Though I'm a huge fan of 12-step recovery and a member of two such fellowships, I cannot speak for them. If you're ready for real talk and practical tools for transformation, keep listening. This is episode 345, How to Build Internal Boundaries So You Stop Fixing Everyone. Over the past several episodes this month, I've been exploring internal boundaries from a few different angles. We talked about emotional activation, about the conversations in your head that drive you crazy and torment you, and about why other people's chaos can feel like an emergency to you, even though it's not happening to you. If I had to sum up the whole series in one sentence, it would be this. Internal boundaries mean you stay connected to yourself instead of rescuing others or beating yourself up inside. Now, to expand it beyond one sentence, you might also say internal boundaries keep you from abandoning yourself, whether it's the self-abandonment of beating the shit out of yourself or the self-abandonment of neglecting yourself by putting everyone else and their needs before your own. And today, I'm going to talk about something very practical, how internal boundaries actually get built. Because when people first hear the phrase internal boundaries, they often think it's something abstract or mysterious, but it's actually something very concrete, and it develops through practice, as all boundaries do. It's an experimental process when you build boundaries. One of the phrases you may have heard me say before is this: I don't set boundaries, I have boundaries. But I want to be clear about that. That wasn't always true. In the beginning, I absolutely had to set boundaries. I had to consciously decide what I was going to do and not do, and sometimes I had to actually inform other people about my boundaries. I had to stop myself from doing things I'd always done automatically. Some of them were inside my head, like catastrophizing, and some of them were external, like jumping in to rescue people or acting like things were okay with me when I was dying inside. Over time, that changed. Eventually, those boundaries stopped being something I had to actively enforce, and they became something I simply had. They became integrated. They became internalized as part of me. And the exact same process happens with internal boundaries. That's what we're talking about today. At first, you have to set them inside yourself. That means interrupting your old patterns and reminding yourself about what's actually true. It means soothing your nervous system by the things you say to yourself. And eventually, after enough repetition, those internal boundaries become part of who you are. You stop having the same internal flare-ups that used to light you on fire and felt like an internal emergency. Here's what that actually looks like in real life. For many people, one of the biggest patterns is the urge to jump in and rescue other people. Someone around you is struggling. Maybe they're upset or overwhelmed. Maybe they're mired in chaos. And something inside you activates. Your nervous system beats up. Your mind starts automatically solving their problem. You feel a sense of urgency and you feel responsible for them. You feel like you have to step in and fix it. That's the moment when internal boundary work begins. Because instead of automatically following that impulse, you pause. And maybe you say something to yourself like, their problem is not my emergency. That sentence is an internal boundary. You're not saying it to them. You're saying it to yourself silently in your head. You're reminding your nervous system that someone else's difficulty does not automatically require you to intervene. But then this is where the deeper work begins, because when you stop following the old pattern, you start to get a bunch of those pesky feelings, the things you've been trying to avoid your entire adult life. So feelings arise like guilt, or maybe you feel anxious. You might feel selfish or ashamed. You might feel like you're abandoning them. And those feelings can be very convincing. And this is where another internal boundary comes in. You remind yourself this guilt, it's a feeling, not an instruction. Feelings are information. They're not commands or instructions or dictates that you have to follow. Just because you feel guilty does not mean you're doing something wrong. That's old programming. So instead of acting on the guilt, you allow the feeling to exist. And then you do something else that's incredibly important. You calm and soothe your nervous system. Now, typically, we do this by grounding ourselves in the present moment in some way. So often it's taking several deep breaths, connecting with your senses by doing things like feeling your feet on the ground, your butt in the chair, maybe looking around the room and naming 3 things you can see, or listening carefully and trying to discern 3 different sounds. You can only do those things in the present moment. So what that means is you're anchored in now, not in the past or in the future. Then you remind yourself that other adults are responsible for their own lives. You stay with yourself instead of abandoning yourself in order to manage someone else. Grounding yourself is a way to keep your attention focused on you and the present moment instead of leaving yourself and pulling your attention to the external world. You keep the focus on yourself and in yourself. Now, something else I want to make clear here, because people often misunderstand this. When they hear the idea of not rescuing or not jumping in to fix things, they sometimes worry that what I'm describing is that they emotionally withdraw from the other person. They worry it means that they're becoming cold or distant or building walls between them and others. It doesn't. Internal boundaries are actually the opposite of withdrawal. Withdrawal is when you disconnect from the other person. Internal boundaries are where you stay connected to them without disconnecting from yourself. You can still care, still listen, still feel compassion, but you're not taking charge of their experience. That's the difference between caring for someone and rescuing someone. You're taking responsibility for them and their experience when you're rescuing. And something magical happens once internal boundaries start to strengthen. Your external boundaries begin to change too. Because when you're not activated internally anymore, it becomes so much easier to stand strong in your boundary of not jumping in to rescue, fix, and save others. When you're not activated, you can access the frontal lobe of your brain, which is the rational part of your brain where reasoning happens and where you can detect nuance. This allows you to be able to recall phrases like the following and say them to the other person. Phrases like, "That sounds really hard," or "I'm sure you'll figure it out," or sometimes simply saying nothing and allowing the other person to handle their own situation. You're still present, you're still compassionate, and that steadiness is what internal boundaries create. Do your boundaries fall apart the moment someone gets upset? Most people think the hard part of boundaries is knowing what to say, but real challenge comes after you say it. When someone gets upset, when your nervous system lights up, when you feel the urge to explain, soften, or take it back. That's where boundaries tend to collapse. I'm teaching a live workshop called Why Your Boundaries Collapse and How to Make Them Hold. It's live on Zoom for 1 hour on Tuesday, April 14th at 12:30 Eastern Daylight Time. It's all about the missing piece most people are never taught, which is how to build internal safety so you can stay steady even when emotions run high. If you want boundaries that actually hold, go to higherpowercc.com/collapse. Early bird pricing through March 31st.